In our latest Denver Broncos mailbag, members of Broncos Country want to know if we are willing to risk it all for the Broncos to get Travis Hunter. How realistic or unrealistic would this be? And our thoughts on how it would happen. You're going to get that and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where, as always, it is your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And if you're not yet an everydayer, it's easy to become one. All you have to do is hit that subscribe or that follow button wherever you get your podcast, and you will never miss out on anything that's going on with your favorite team. That is the Denver Broncos. As always, Broncos Country, I'm your host, Cody Roark, credentialed Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there at predominantlyorange.com.
And you get us here every single day, all year long. That is our promise to you, the avid listeners out there in Broncos Country. And as always, we like to feature you in the show. So today's episode, it is a mailbag. You sent in your mailbag questions to Sayre and myself, and we answer them. And look, we got a lot of interesting ones, including whether or not the Broncos should risk it all for Travis Hunter by trading into the top 5. What would that look like? And also, Broncos Country wants to know if Courtland Sutton is overvalued by Denver fans and media. And on top of that, what would be the riskiest and safest picks in round number 1? We'll break down all those mailbag questions and much more on today's episode of the show. Sayre, obviously, always love when Broncos Country can get involved, as we're just 24 hours away from the NFL draft from happening. There's a lot of moving pieces that obviously come about that. And obviously, the week of the draft, we know there's a lot of buzz. And certainly when we woke up on Tuesday, we heard some rumblings. It was being widely reported by Peter Schrager, I think Adam Schefter, Albert Breer, that the Cleveland Browns and I think also the New York Giants were also maybe looking. They were entertaining calls to potentially trade back. So their spots, obviously, for their picks were potentially up. Very interesting, though. This has led to Broncos Country, I think, sending in the question. It comes in from Brian Beasy. He says, would you risk it all with a Godfather offer to be able to select Travis Hunter or Ashton Jeanty? Which player would be more valuable to the Broncos? First and second round picks in 2025 and 2026, plus a Riley Moss or a Jonah Ellis. Where would you draw the line? Considering the rumblings of trading up, this for the Broncos, I think is very unrealistic. But let's play the hypothetical, right? If you were to get that offer, you simply can't refuse to move up. Would you get Travis Hunter or would you get Ashton Jeanty with the 3rd or 4th overall picks?
I think in this scenario, I would rather have Travis Hunter. He is probably that one guy that I would say is worth moving heaven and earth for in this draft. And I love the question because it creates a fun hypothetical, like, over the next couple of years here, do you want to deplete your draft capital again? Because why would Cleveland be motivated to do this? Well, they've had their draft capital depleted for the last 3 years, right? This is the first time I think they've been back in the first round since the Deshaun Watson trade, and they've really struggled to build that roster around anybody, and they're losing guys now. They had a window there where they felt like they could compete. They won 11 games where they had, 18 different guys at quarterback, basically. So that roster is now starting to slowly fizzle a little bit. And so you could see why a team like Cleveland would want to move back and potentially still get the quarterback that they want later on, which there's a lot of buzz around a lot of different guys. And I don't think they view that player as worth the 2nd overall pick and then whatever else they could get in a trade back. So might as well start calling around and seeing what teams think. And for Denver, Travis Hunter is the game changer of all game changers in this draft. He's the wide receiver one. He's the cornerback one. So you're kind of getting 2 players for one in a way with him. But Cody, I think with what this Broncos team needs right now, a true, legit, elite playmaker at receiver, that is what I view Travis Hunter as. Best ball skills in the draft, loves the game of football. I just feel like you see that every time he plays. Like he cares so much about the game, and he cares about being excellent at everything that he does. He's that one guy that I would say is worth this kind of a unreasonable, unrealistic trade haul.
Yeah, and look, he's a very fantastic player. It's hard to be able to do what he's been able to do. Champ Bailey was able to do it, play a little bit of both ways. Obviously, you look at other guys, historically, it's tough. But for Travis to do it in the modern era that is today's college football, where he's playing well over 100 total snaps a game if you combine both offense and defense, it's going to be hard to replicate that at the NFL level. Though I do think teams are going to have a preference for him. I think whatever that may be, like for example, if the preference is for him to play cornerback, I still would not be shocked if whatever team takes him says, hey, we are going to give you 10 to 15 offensive snaps per game, but we value you more right now on the defensive side of the ball. Or Travis is going to be the first player, which, he's got the mindset, the work ethic to do it. He's going to be the first player that's going to try to play both ways in a sense at the NFL level. Is it sustainable when you talk about the National Football League and obviously the bigger, faster physical defenses, things like that? I don't know, but I'm not going to sit here and say like, hey, he can't do it, because Travis has also been a guy. A lot of people have said, hey, this guy can't do this. He can't do that. And look at him. I mean, he won the Heisman. He's a terrific player. He's a, once in a lifetime type of guy at that type of position. That versatility is very special. And I think teams value that there. But for me, I don't know. I feel like I'd have him on defense. You factor him into the mix, especially if you want to put him in the slot at times, like what would that mean for Jaquan McMillan? I mean, I think you bring in a guy like Travis Hunter, it would put some things into question a little bit for what your defense does. So as cool as it would be to keep Travis in Colorado, Sayre, I don't think it would be realistic. I don't think the Broncos would try to jump from 20th all the way to 3rd or 4th or even 2nd. I don't even think that would be the case. I think the haul would be this year's first-round pick, next year's first-round pick, probably, maybe even a couple of mid-round picks or maybe even a player attached to that as well. Would the Broncos want to part with that much capital just to make a move like that? I don't know. As cool as it would be from the Colorado ties, and he's even said he'd love to be a Denver Bronco to stay in Colorado, probably just unrealistic in terms of what's going to happen here. But let's get to another one here. Like, I know you planted your flag on the fact that you would here. Now, I wanted to ask you your question because this is kind of the second part of it. He said first and second round picks in 2025 and 2026, plus a Riley Moss or Jonah Ellis to be able to move that way. I don't want to part ways with these young core pieces just to be able to do that. That's another thing there.
That would be really tough, especially when you're talking about, hey, we feel like we've built a roster that is ready to contend in the AFC. And then like you've mentioned before, you rob Peter to pay Paul in a sort of manner of speaking right there, right? It's like you're stealing from yourself to help yourself. And that ultimately is not, it's not about having your cake and eating it too. It's about coming together on what's a fair trade, right? And in a trade like this, you would have to be trading from a surplus to realistically be able to pull something off, to add players into the mix. You can't take away guys who are part of the core that you believe is ready to compete. Why you would make a trade like this in the first place, right? And so while I do believe that Hunter is worth moving heaven and earth to go get, at the same time, you have to also think, okay, well, we feel like we have a good enough roster to compete, but it's adding a piece to that, not taking away other pieces to add a piece. That's, taking 2 steps back to take 1 step forward. It's not how it should be, right? So, but if you're the Broncos, are you thinking like, man, our next year's first round pick, that's going to be in the mid to late 20s, or even let's shoot for the stars 30s, right? I mean, you want to go big or go home. If you're thinking that your pick's going to be that late, that kind of does add an interesting wrinkle to the discussion internally. But at the same time, George Payton said this is the most prepared he's ever been for a draft. You'd be wasting that, right? You'd say, hey, let's wipe these picks off the board. You're getting Travis Hunter and then maybe a couple of day 3 picks, or you keep maybe your 3rd round pick or something like that. Who knows? But I don't know. You'd be wasting a little bit of that preparedness in a way.
Yeah, and I think right now the Broncos have 7 picks going into the draft. And essentially, right now the roster is at 71, though they did receive a international player designation exemption for Thomas Yasmin for the 2nd consecutive year. So even though they have 71 players on their roster right now after bringing in a long snapper, Zach Triner, to compete with Mitchell Fraboni, I know some other Broncos who sprinkled into here, they're still essentially at 70. So it's like you have 7 picks, okay, that puts you at 77. Then probably the rest of that would be undrafted rookie free agents and maybe a couple of veterans that maybe impressed during a tryout that you bring onto your 90-man training camp roster. So a lot of moving pieces. I don't know if you want to sacrifice some of that young capital there because, in mind, you're really trying to nail this draft. Like, yes, you want to get good players, but also Denver might be in a position next year where it's like, hey, We're going to have more money in free agency. We're going to load up even more, but then our draft is going to be probably more so focused on continuing to just add depth at that point. Or if there's a player who is on his way out the door, like, can you bring in an eventual replacement? That's the dilemma. That's the challenge here. But always fun to jump into these hypotheticals here. Broncos Country, thank you so much for sending in your mailbag questions. We have a lot more to throw your way here on today's episode of the show. One Broncos listener, Locked On Broncos every day, or asked the question, is Courtland Sutton overvalued by Denver media and fans? We'll dive deep into this and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode, Locked On Broncos, is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And as you all know, at FanDuel, they are America's #1 sportsbook. And right now is the perfect time to get in on the action because the NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Because right now, when you join FanDuel and you place your first $5 bet on any of the NBA playoff games or anything for that matter, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins.
And FanDuel makes betting so easy, right? Whether it's picking your favorite team to win or diving into the player props, three-pointers, steals, assists, like FanDuel gives you so many different ways to bet your favorite player props or your favorite teams. And after the game tips off, you can even combine those live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Broncos Country, Courtland Sutton, overvalued or properly valued? Don't underestimate Courtland Sutton. Properly estimate him from this point forward because he is a key piece for the Denver Broncos, although there might be a chance that he is a bit of one of those overrated guys by the fans and media. We're going to talk about that today from one of the questions that you sent in for our Denver Broncos mailbag here as we approach the 2025 NFL Draft. We are just one day away, Broncos Country, from seeing some new players added to the team. We think, at least, the Broncos, you never know, could trade out of the first round as much as we talk about the idea of trading up. But Cody, one of the most interesting pieces of this roster right now is wide receiver Courtland Sutton, who has said recently that he's pleased with the way things are going in terms of his new contract. It was expected that right before or right after the draft, he would get a contract extension. Can't help but wonder how much the moving market after the increase in the salary cap really changed the way the Broncos are approaching this, but it doesn't sound like any sort of negative by any means. We had a question sent in to us from Josh on Twitter. He gave actually a hot take and then asked a question. I'm gonna share his hot take with you, and I want to have your response to that. The Broncos trade Sutton during the draft is his hot take, and that's why there's no new deal just yet. So you get the 20th pick and next year's first to be able to move up to 5, right? So you acquire extra capital from trading Courtland Sutton, and then you trade assets to move into the top 5. What do you think of that take? Do you think that there's even a remote chance that Sutton is going to get traded at this point?
No, I don't think so. And look, even if that was the case, I don't think, a team would necessarily just take Denver's 20th pick and Courtland Sutton and then swap to 5. I think it would require way much more capital than that to do it. No, look, here's the thing. The reason why there is no new deal yet for Courtland Sutton is because the Broncos' focus has been on the NFL draft because there's still some moving pieces. And as we know, they're still figuring out, okay, hey, we need to figure out what our plan for the draft is going to be. After they do that, they're going to work on their rookie contracts and obviously undrafted free agents. They're going to figure out the signing bonuses for some of those guys, who gets the highest. And then after that, it's now we can sit here because we have this time before we get into OTAs and mini camp and training camp. The goal is by training camp to come to terms with Courtland on a new deal, which is something that obviously I think conversations between both parties have been taking place. And from what I understand, conversations from both sides have gone extremely well. And the idea is that Courtland will finish his career as a member of the Broncos. I don't see him being traded on draft day. Look, the Broncos, I'll be very clear with this. Sarah, you and I have probably discussed this hundreds of times on the show, but the Broncos have had so many opportunities to trade away Courtland Sutton if they wanted to in the time since Sean Payton has been here, and they have never pulled the trigger. They have never once entertained that, even though teams have made some pretty good offers for Courtland. Sean Payton values what his size and what his explosive ability can bring to the table. And I know the 33rd team just put something out there earlier in the week where I think his explosive play percentage, I think it was around 37%. It was the top of the NFL. And then below him was Justin Jefferson. So when you look at the explosive play percentage, right, can that amplify even more? Like the fact that he was the primary target and teams knew that and he was still producing there is exciting, which to me, it's like when you add weapons around him, now it creates more opportunities for him to go out there and just be that guy that I think we've always known that he can be. And I'll rest on my hot take, in which I've said this before. I still think Courtland Sutton in the next 2 to 3 years is going to play his best football of his career. And I still think he's got a lot of good football left in the tank, but his best is going to be these next 2 to 3 years, better than what we've seen so far, which could be a hot take in and of itself, considering the last 2 years, 18 touchdowns combined in the last 2 seasons. So, no, I don't agree with the hot take. I don't see that happening, my friend.
So let's vamp off that for a minute, because the follow-up to that was Josh's question here. He says, Courtland Sutton is a very good receiver. Why do Broncos fans and media think he's so much better than he is? Is it because they have nothing else? I know you mentioned that you think that we could yet see his best football ahead of him. So I think to maybe rephrase this question a little bit to kind of fit what I think he's saying here. And I agree. I think that there's a lot of times where it seems like Courtland gets talked about as like a bona fide wide receiver one. But like you said, if his best football is yet to come, what's missing, do you think? What do you notice on a week-to-week basis? You're just like, it's just not quite there with Sutton. Like there's this margin that we're not hitting. Like there's the point to which, you say there's a ceiling for guys, right? Or like he could reach his full potential or whatever it is. What do you view as that missing thing for Sutton, the disconnect between him being perceived as a true wide receiver one by a lot of fans and media, and that not necessarily being the case on a week-to-week basis?
I think complementary pieces around him. I mean, Sayre, how many times did we always go through and say, like, wow, we would really love to see a year where Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, all these guys could just stay healthy and like play like together, like where they're all healthy, where they're all in the rotation. The reality of Courtland's career is not only has he gone through a handful of different head coaches, offensive coordinators, quarterbacks, but the receiver room has kind of been up and down too. The pieces around him haven't necessarily been the strongest. I'd say maybe you had the argument there where he and Tim Patrick were probably the Broncos' best wide receiver duo that they've had in quite some time since DT and Emmanuel Sanders. And even then, their production never matched anything close to what we saw from DT and Emmanuel. Those guys put up special numbers. But, for Courtland, I do feel like despite the quarterback, no matter who's been throwing the ball, I feel like he's always been able to produce. I think he's kind of been a quarterback-proof type of player, and I've always felt like they've needed a little bit more around him. I don't think we've seen the best of Courtland yet in a couple of categories, right? We know he can be that deep ball guy. We know he's going to make those contested, improbable catches. They're going to elevate next-gen stats, numbers there. But the thing I would love to see more in this offense, Sayre, from Courtland and from Broncos coaches is to utilize him on slants. Like, I want to see more slants. I want to see more in-breaking routes. Courtland is big. He's physical. He's explosive. Find a way to get him the ball in space and then see what he can do. You want to respect the deep ball, obviously there, but, Courtland wants to continue to evolve as a route runner. I think having adequate pieces around him will increase that to allow him to be that better receiver. Is he like a wide receiver one, like a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase? I don't think he's at that caliber, but I think in his own way, he is a wide receiver one, at least on Denver. And that's okay because he doesn't have to be Calvin Johnson. He just needs to be Courtland Sutton, and other guys around him need to be able to produce, because that's what's going to make the Broncos better in the long run. You have a guy who can produce at a high level. You know that with Courtland. Courtland is a proven guy, but can everybody else around him step up so he's not facing double team or bracket coverage situations on third down? I think the fact that how teams play Courtland is a great sign of respect for just how good he is. I think Courtland, if anything, is probably more underappreciated than he is overvalued.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the pieces around him is going to be a huge thing for the Broncos to address. We expect that to happen, obviously, here in this draft. So I do get the tension and the frustration with Sutton. I mean, last year, the quarterback rating when targeted dipped quite significantly from the year previous. In 2023, it was 120.2 when he was targeted. In 2024, 86.7, which is average to below average. And so you want to see him obviously maximizing those targets that he is getting. And last season was the highest volume of targets that we have seen for Courtland Sutton in his NFL career. 135 targets, 81 catches, 1,081 yards, and obviously those 8 touchdown grabs. So I do agree with you, Cody. I think that his best football is yet to come, but I also kind of fall in that camp of of saying like he's left a little bit to be desired out there from what the perception
That's
is.
fair.
Especially like with the pay grade that he's about to receive, right? I mean, if he's going to be getting upwards of 23, 25 million per year, he's got to cut down on the drops. He's got to cut down on the stretches of play where we're like, why is Courtland Sutton not getting the ball? Like, why are we gone so long without him getting a target? We need more. We need more from him. And I know that I don't know if it's just more targets, or I don't know if it's more of him maximizing the targets, but I agree with you. Give me the slants, give me the additional opportunities throughout the game to really see if he can maximize. Now, if you add some more help at receiver, or if your guys develop, get him those opportunities in single coverage and see if he can get back to, I guess, that 2023 form where he was just dominating every time the ball came his way.
Need to see more of that. And look, I think your point on the drops is very valid. You just want to see a little more consistency in that regard, for him. And, higher volume of targets means that you might have more chances for drops. And what constitutes as a drop? Is it a catchable pass? Is it clearly hit his hands and bounced off? I think there's different levels to it. But Courtland has been the most consistent guy the Broncos have had a wide receiver in a handful of years. And luckily, he's overcome the injury hurdle, the ACL, after the 2020 season. And he's been a stable part of them. In the last couple of years, he's continued to ascend. And now that the Broncos have a QB in place that clearly values him and says, hey, if I'm not getting you the football, come tell me. Like, come let me know. I'll find a way to get it to you. I think that Denver's in a really good position right now. They have a chance to build on that, obviously, in the NFL draft. But great mailbag question sent in from Josh. And obviously, Broncos Country want to know your discussion, as always, here on today's episode. Locked On Broncos. We're not done yet. We're going to jump into the fourth quarter action here. One member of Broncos Country asks us our opinion. What would be the riskiest or the safest pick for the Broncos in round number 1 of the NFL draft on Thursday? We'll share our thoughts on that and much more here on today's episode. Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. And did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? All you got to do, turn on any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. You can dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 or Call of Duty Black Ops 6 or Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Plus, you get endless entertainment with 4K streaming. Watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more.
What you love is the affordability and the portability, right? You can play high quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of having a console. And if you already have a console, great, a Fire TV Stick 4K device, it's more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take yours or your kids' games like I do with Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, wherever you plug in. This is a great way to get started playing some Xbox games if you haven't already done so. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required, and it's available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation.
The fourth quarter action of today's episode of Locked On Broncos is here. And as we get you ready for the 2-minute warning, we're going to dive deeper into some of your Broncos mailbag questions here on today's episode of the show. Real quick, want to say thank you once again to the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. It's a busy week here this week. The NFL draft is coming up, so make sure you stay tuned and locked into Locked On Broncos, because we're going to have you covered with every pick, instant analysis, reaction, what it does to make the Broncos better, and much more here wherever you get your podcasts. Sayre, we get another question that comes in here from Jolene on Twitter. She asked the question, who would be the riskiest pick in the first round for the Broncos, and who would be the safest pick? I feel like this could honestly go a multitude of ways here. Depending on how the board falls. I want to start off with you. Let's start off with riskiest pick first. If you had to go through, if the Broncos were to make a pick at 20 or even trade up to get a player, who would be the riskiest pick in your opinion?
I'm taking Walter Nolan, the defensive lineman out of Ole Miss here as my riskiest pick. And I think it's risky on a number of levels, right? This is the former #1 recruit in the country, former 5-star prospect who had a really good season last year in stretches, right? And that's one of the biggest reasons why I think the Broncos brought him in on a top 30 visit this year, is to say, hey, what makes this guy's motor run hot and cold? Why is it not always running hot? Because defensive linemen, especially at Ole Miss last year, where they got about 18 NFL caliber guys, why are we not maximizing the snaps that we're playing every single game? Why are we not dominating for stretches? We see the physicality, we see the athleticism. You are a 5-star guy. Why is it streaky? So I think that makes him risky inherently, but I think also you really risk upsetting the apple cart here with a group of guys on that defensive line that, well, they all deserve to be paid. Whether or not it's going to happen from the Denver Broncos remains to be seen. But Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, Malcolm Roach, those guys are all entering a contract year. Using a 1st or 2nd round pick on a guy like Walter Nolan, you risk getting just one of those guys being like, all right, you drafted my replacement, get me out of here, because I'm going to lose snaps to this guy. I'm going to lose money because I'm losing snaps. So I feel like there's inherent risk to taking any defensive lineman with that, in mind. But Walter Nolan specifically very much got some boomer bust potential to him.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I mean, would it be the sexy pick too in terms of the eyes of Broncos country? I know they like him. Is Derek Harmon, is he more of a sure thing, a defensive line, if you're going to go with the defensive line guy over a guy like a Walter Nolan? I think it's a great conversation. It's a great debate here. For me, my riskiest player, Sayre, would be Nick Emenwari, obviously the safety out of South Carolina. And here's my reasoning behind that. I'm not trying to diminish him. I think he'd be an impact player 100%. But for where the organization is at right now, for them already to have Brandon Jones and Talanoa Hufanga, and they already have another guy who's been a starter on PJ Locke on the roster right now. They got young guys like JL Skinner, Devin Key that they want to see a little bit more out of. For me, the reason it would be risky is because it wouldn't be necessarily a position that you need, or that would even be like an instant want right now. Like the Broncos don't need to upgrade at that position right now because they went out there and spent money in free agency to be able to do that. And you want to see, like the Broncos really want to see something out of JL Skinner this year. So it wouldn't necessarily make sense. Could it be a fail-safe potentially if JL Skinner doesn't show them what they necessarily want? Maybe, but JL's got this year. He's also got next year left on his contract, on his rookie deal here with the Broncos. So for me, I just think the value-wise, it would be like, what are the Broncos doing here? I would much rather them add a player in round 1 that we know can probably play and rotate in right away as a rookie. Emenwari could possibly do that, especially, maybe the Broncos make a decision on a PJ Locke or Delarian Turnio. But right now they have so many safeties on the roster. This would not be a move that makes sense to me. It doesn't, while you get an impact player, is it moving the needle for your team right away? I don't think that would be the case here. That's why I think it would be the riskiest here, considering where Denver is at right now. As a matter of fact, I think Emenwari would be a perfect candidate to land with the Baltimore Ravens, at this point. Mm-hmm. Get them 2 Kyle Hamiltons at this point. So that would be my riskiest here, and I'm very curious for what Broncos country would say. But now let's transition to the second part of her question. Who would be the safest pick, in your opinion, for the Broncos at 20th?
Well, I've said before that there's no such thing as a perfect prospect in the NFL draft, right? But I do believe that TreVeyon Henderson out of Ohio State checks every single box when you talk about football character, when you talk about athletic, border, they have those, the thresholds that guys have to meet. Well, he vastly exceeds them far and away. He's somebody who started at Ohio State at a very young age. He 667 touches, 1 fumble in his entire college career, and it happened when he was a true freshman. So pass protects, explosive speed, elusiveness, very much so in the realm of what a joker should be for Sean Payton's offense. It just feels like situationally and roster-wise for what the Broncos need, football character-wise for what they always covet, I feel like he's the safest guy. And I know that's not always the sexiest pick in the first round. Last year, how many people hated the idea of Bo Nix at 12 because he's boring. He checks the ball.
And they listen to too many people on Twitter.
Don't listen to Twitter all the time, right? I mean, the NFL train chugs along, but look, sometimes the right pick is the boring, safe pick. And I don't think TreVeyon Henderson's all that boring, to be honest with you.
No, I don't either. Look, he was one of the guys I listed as my safest picks as well, that I'd be like very secure, very happy about, because he offers you value in three of the most important elements of your offense. That's pass protection. That's the passing game, obviously, as a receiver, and obviously as a runner. I think TreVeyon's got it all. And look, I had a chance to watch John Gruden's quarterback class on YouTube. I don't know if you had a chance yet to do that,
No.
Sayre, but I watched it with Will Howard. And, while Will Howard's going through his process with Gruden, you're seeing TreVeyon make a lot of plays, and you're seeing Will Howard talk about, hey, pass protection. We got a reliable guy right here that I know is going to pick up a blitz if need be. But, hey, based on this defensive look, I know TreVeyon was going to be the guy I was going to hit out of the backfield here. You get great insight into that. So, I like that. I would also say Courtland Sutton would be a very safe, secure pick. And I don't think it would be boring in any way, shape, or form because, man, he's got really ridiculous athletic tools to it. And I think a lot of people, we've seen some comments are like, well, if you look at his numbers, they weren't that impressive. Do people not watch Michigan? Michigan is a run-first offense. They ran for over 2,000 yards collectively as a team last season. So for him to put up the numbers that he did, I think is valuable. But on top of that, this is a guy who can block. This is a guy who can be a field stretcher for you. So outside of just looking at the stats, watch the tape, watch things. Don't look at highlights. Watch the actual games. Watch the tape itself. That to me is the most important thing. I think Courtland Sutton would be a secure pick. I think Tyler Warren would fall into that category as well as a very secure pick for the Broncos. And obviously TreVeyon Henderson at this point. And that opens up, obviously, our question to you, Broncos country. Who do you think would be the riskiest pick for the Broncos at 20th overall? Who do you think would be the safest pick for them as well? We want to hear your thoughts here on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. But that'll wrap up today's show. And Broncos country, all you everydayers out there, tomorrow's episode of the show, Sayre and myself, we're going to sit down. We're going to share our final predictions on draft day, what we think is going to happen in round one. And obviously, we'll see if it happens there. You can expect a bonus episode as well following the Broncos selection in day one on round one, 20th overall. Or if they trade up or trade back, you're going to get another episode of Locked On Broncos reacting to it as well from Sayre and myself. Broncos country, we appreciate you so much for watching us, tuning in, however you choose to do so. If you're not yet an everydayer, become one. Subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcast. And we'll catch you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.